I'm joined now by Congressman Jamie Raskin. Congressman, thank you for joining me.
You bet. I'm delighted to be with you, Brian.
All right, so we are in a constitutional crisis right now where the executive branch, led by the unelected richest man in the world, is basically usurping all power in government and unilaterally accessing sensitive information, has access to the Treasury. He's shutting down agencies, deciding where congressionally allocated funding can go and whether it can go. So I want to start off by channeling the voices of millions of people out there who want to know really what the hell is going on right now and what Democrats are doing to push back against this.
Well, thank you, Brian, for putting the question so clearly. I do believe that as despondent as it is, we need to be very clear about what's going on. And I think the easiest way to wrap your head around it is that this is a coup, which is a seizure of state power by unelected actors by taking control over the central institutions and functions of government. So Elon Musk has essentially seized control over the financial payment systems of the US government, much of the communications systems of the United States, the data infrastructure, and of course, he's got his claws also into the military infrastructure as well. So, in addition to everything that Donald Trump is doing to dismantle every part of government that doesn't profit him personally and his friends personally, we have this additional problem of Elon Musk essentially trying to consolidate state power under him and transform the nature of our constitutional order.
So as it relates to Elon, I know that the answer is that he can't do the things that he's doing, but the reality is, the practical reality is that he is doing them. So given that we're beyond the point where he and Trump are respecting the law, what is our recourse then here?
Well, we're going to have to fight them in every channel and social context and governmental arena that we can. We're going to fight them in subcommittees and in the committees of the House and of the Senate. We're going to fight them in court. There have already been several setbacks dealt to the administration in court. As you know, Donald Trump tried to impose a new birthright citizenship rule, basically taking millions of people who are United States citizens in the country and then making them into undocumented immigrants based on who their parents were. That was shut down by a Reagan-appointed judge. They're appealing it, but that's a win. As you know, they froze federal spending at the end of last week and over the weekend, completely nullifying congressional power over appropriations. That's a central power of the legislative branch of government, the power of the purse. Again, a United States District Court judge in the District of Columbia shut that down and enjoined it. And there were oral arguments on that yesterday that went very well for our side. So we are going to assert the Constitution, the rule of law, the civil service rules as a blockade against what they're doing at every turn. And public pressure, public vigilance about what's happening are going to be essential in this process.
Congressman, among your Republican colleagues, is there any red line for them? I mean, to see an unelected bureaucrat basically on the pretense of trying to block other unelected bureaucrats, even though that's what he is at this point, to see him going in there and putting his claws into everything, getting access to sensitive information, putting high school graduates in charge of payment processing systems that include social security numbers. Is there any red line in public or private among your Republican colleagues?
Well, we'll see, Brian. I mean, we weren't in session last week and we weren't in session the last couple of days. I think that they sent us out of session early, actually, because there was such popular and political rejection of their mass pardons of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and the insurrectionists. They wanted to change the subject. That's what I think gave a lot of people the impression that our leadership wasn't doing anything and people were beating up on the Democrats. We weren't here. I mean, for someone like me whose district is right next door to Washington, it's easy enough for me to go down to USAID and to
Right.
protest and to object. And we had a bunch of the Maryland and Virginia people there. But in any event, we have gotten our fight back. People are ready to fight this. Now, as for the Republicans, we don't know. There are one or two who have been uttering some of their reservations and their objections to what's going on, but I've been absolutely shocked and really devastated at the way that they've fallen into line for these completely corrupt and unqualified cabinet nominees that Trump has put through, including Kash Patel, an election denier, a J6 enthusiast and supporter, and an avatar of MAGA lawlessness, who is just about to become the director of the FBI. I mean, it's just dumbfounding to me this is taking place. And Lincoln's party of liberty and union has become Trump's party of chaos and dysfunction.
You'd mentioned that there were all of one or two who have been, issuing some rumblings behind the scenes. What do you think that these same people, these Republicans, would say if George Soros all of a sudden was anointed some special government advisor and got access to every sensitive agency, every sensitive piece of information, all of Americans' private data, social security numbers? What do you think those same Republicans, all of whom are falling in line right now, would say about that?
Well, Brian, I used to perform that mental experiment all the time, including during the impeachment crisis, where I said, imagine if Bill Clinton or Barack Obama had incited a mob of tens of thousands of people to go and fight like hell. And if you don't, you're not going to have a country anymore, and sat back and watched it eating hamburgers outside of the Oval Office and not saying anything other than my vice president didn't have the courage to do what needed to be done. And I would always flip it over and I would pose it to them. And then I realized that that represents an obsolete mode of thinking, which is that the GOP members will act according to principles and to principled reasons for action. They have dissolved into complete tribalism. They believe, including the ones they've stuck on the Supreme Court, that Donald Trump can do no wrong. Or as Trump, so vividly put it, I could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and I wouldn't lose their support. He was right about that. He understood the cultish dimensions of their support. So I try to flip these over in the mental thought experiment that you propose, but it's meaningless to them. They don't understand it. For them, whatever Donald Trump does goes. They will defend it no matter what. And whatever he says about the foes or the enemies of Donald Trump, they will believe and they will follow that too.
Right, it's a complete moving target. Gone are the days where there's any long-standing principles that you can pin them to. At this point, to your exact point, it's just complete deference to whatever Trump says and does. And if that changes by the week, the day, the hour, the minute, so be it. They're just along for the ride.
It's a completely humiliating thing to them. I mean, you have members over there like Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz, whom Trump has personally insulted. He's called their wives ugly, said Ted Cruz's father assassinated John F. Kennedy or was in on the plot to do it. I mean, just outrageous things. And they all come and they kiss his ring. And that's not all. And so it's utterly abasing and humiliating and denigrating for them. But they do it. So ours, in addition to being the party of democracy and freedom now, is the party of self-respect.
Yeah. You got into a public argument with Elon Musk over the last couple of days where, you were standing up along with some colleagues to protect USAID. Elon came out, he called it a coup because, of course, he's trying to draw some false equivalency between January 6th and rightfully standing up for an agency that Elon Musk has no power to dissolve. While you were standing up for USAID, Elon Musk wrote back, and I'll put the tweet right here on the screen, what Raskin actually means is that he wants his kickbacks and bribes to continue. So that was obviously a defamatory statement by Elon. Because Elon and Trump and Republicans now clearly have their marching orders, and that is to destroy everything that really doesn't serve the ultra-wealthy, doesn't serve these Republican donors, and so they're on this scorched earth mission to just denigrate every agency that doesn't help them. first off, can you very briefly explain what USAID is and why it's important?
Sure. Well, it was created originally by President Kennedy and by Congress to engage in what today we call soft power, or
Right.
the projection of American influence and American foreign policy objectives by rendering aid to people. And that could be anything from helping people build effective water projects, to fighting HIV/AIDS, to malaria nets and anti-malaria campaigns, to building up development projects, democracy. We're all over the world with AID. It's less than 1% of the overall budget. It's the whole foreign aid budget's around $40 billion a year compared to $900 billion that goes to the Department of Defense alone, without getting into other national security agencies and departments. So it's a tiny fraction, but that money means something, has helped to buy lots of goodwill for America, and also help to prevent diseases that come back and haunt us, and also prevent the disease of authoritarianism and autocracy, which is one of the key reasons that Elon Musk and Donald Trump want to dismantle it.
Right. Now, at the risk of getting too wonky here, on that exact point, this is a really important point, I think, about USAID. China has what's called the Belt and Road Initiative. So why is USAID important to combat Chinese soft power? And what are the implications going to be if we cede that ground to the Chinese?
Well, we're already hearing now, with them having pulled the plug on all foreign aid projects on USAID all over the world, that China is moving in to say, well, they don't want to help you, but we're happy to help you. I mean, one of the things people love about America is the compassion of America, the democratic solidarity of America, the fact that we're a country with a big heart, made up of people who come from all over the world. And we stand with people. And then suddenly we're sending the message that we are going to stop programs to help pregnant women and infants all over the world. We're going to stop programs to bring food raised by farmers in Iowa and Louisiana and California to starving people in Asia and in Africa. It just makes no sense. But it is coherent from a political philosophy, which is that America can only get its way by being a bully.
And we're seeing that same strategy play out right now with these tariffs and these trade wars. In your estimation, Trump basically pushing all of our allies away, showing them that America's word is no good anymore, that if we negotiate a trade deal, by the way, a trade deal like the USMCA, which Trump himself signed into law, that those are only as good as, the person in power in the term that he's in it, and maybe not even beyond that. And so can you just speak on what that is, what the implications are going to be, what the impacts are going to be more broadly on America's standing in the world and our ability to even have alliances when, even among our own closest friends, we are instantly picking fights, from Canada to Mexico to Panama to Greenland and on and on?
I mean, I've seen TV ads that the Canadian government and the Ontario government are running in America, just saying, remember, we are allies. We are closest trading partners. We are friends. We go back and forth. We were together in World War II, fighting the Nazis. And so good for Canada, reminding the American people of the relationship that we actually have. And that's something that obviously people who live in Michigan and Minnesota and the northern states understand better than people who live, in the South and so on. But, the Wall Street Journal itself called this the dumbest trade war in American history. Nobody can even understand why Donald Trump is doing it. It just makes no sense. It's incoherent. More chaos, more dysfunction.
Can you speak on the fact that really at the end of the day, what he was able to extract from the Canadians was border security that they had announced back in December? And so it would seem to me that what Trump is trying to do is just create a crisis, manufacture a crisis out of nowhere, look for whatever vague excuse of a concession he can cast out as some PR win, and then beat his chest as some master negotiator, and that none of this is really amounting to anything.
They're building ill will all over the world, including from our closest allies. And it may be that you're right, Brian, that he knew all along he was going to have to give nothing, essentially, or rather get nothing, because what was given by Canada and Mexico was already given. I think they pulled the wool over his eyes. I mean, Mexico said they're going to put 10,000 troops on the border. They already had 15,000 troops on the border. That'd been negotiated, I think, a year or two ago. So, he just likes a lot of razzle dazzle and noise, but the leaders of the world are laughing at him. And we can recognize what like a fraudulent pretense this whole thing was.
And at the same time, you've got Mexico and Canada as leaders who recognize that Trump really just is looking for some PR win, that he's looking for anything he can slap his name on and say, look, I've averted a crisis that, by the way, I created. But then you look at the Chinese, for example, they have placed retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. And so now this trade war is happening. We're in it because they're not playing into his gamesmanship. And so his effort basically to stave away again, a crisis of his own making, at least as it relates to Canada and Mexico, is not going to work with the Chinese.
That's right. That's right. Well, in fact, Elon Musk, who's obviously pulling Donald Trump's strings now, is completely in bed with the CCP and the Chinese government. So they're not going to do anything to help people in Taiwan or Hong Kong or the Tibetans. They're not going to do anything to challenge the authoritarian autocrats who they emulate. They think that there might be some political mileage in having a fake trade war with China, but everybody understands the game that's being played. This is like Orwell's 1984. They basically want to cede a sphere of influence to China so China can just stomp on the human rights of anybody under them. And they want to be able to do the same thing here. I mean, to the point of ridiculousness of saying they're going to take over Panama and Greenland. As states. We do need two new states in America, but it's not Panama and Greenland. It's Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. That's what we're fighting for.
All the while, by the way, with this trade war in effect, that means prices are going to go up on Americans because we import goods ranging from clothing to electronics to shoes to toys and everything in between from China. And so that's going to have absolutely adverse impacts on everybody in this country. Thanks to a president, by the way, whose entire election campaign was predicated on this idea that grocery prices were too high. And that's something that he himself admitted, that the cost of groceries is why he won this election. And his first act as president is to launch a trade war for no reason at all, where the consequence of that is that Americans are going to be paying more money for all goods under the sun.
The price of eggs, by the way, have never been higher in U.S. history.
Yeah. I want to end with this. What can Americans be doing right now? I get a lot of emails from people saying, look, I understand this is what Democrats are doing in Congress. This is what Democrats are doing in the Senate. This is what our elected officials are doing. But what can we do out here? We may not be having women's marches with, millions of people taking to the streets, but there are people agitating at home. They're looking for some way to help. What can they do?
Well, first of all, we're not having marches of millions of people right now because Trump would undoubtedly deploy his private militia of pardoned oath keepers and Proud Boys and 3%ers and violent insurrectionists to come and clash with protesters, to claim Antifa's there and to create street violence so as to give Trump an excuse for imposing martial law. So I think that the forces of opposition, which represent a majority of the American people, are being far more nimble and clever than that. And there are lots of rallies and demonstrations breaking out all over the country in different ways, in different places, but not allowing one to be the focus that they can try to go and crack down on. But we need to be expressing solidarity. That's the watchword, solidarity with everybody who's under attack, whether it's, high school kids in the LGBTQ community, whether it's refugees and immigrants who are under attack, whether it's federal civil service workers, people who just did their jobs as FBI agents and prosecutors. We are defending the whole American constitutional order. So when people say, what do we need to do? I say, what day and what hour are you talking about? Because we need everybody to be vigilant, to be awake to everything that's taking place, because we are witnessing an attempt to replace the American constitutional order. But they don't know what they're messing with on their side, because every time they attack another institution, another community, another person, that's one more ally for us. And our forces are growing. We get stronger every day.
Well, Congressman, I appreciate you being in this fight and for taking some time out to talk to me today.
Thanks for everything that you're doing, Brian.